So good afternoon, everyone. My name's Eric, and I did my Sturbridge tree inventory on Sturbridge, Massachusetts. Now, Sturbridge, Massachusetts is located in Worcester County, and as we can see on the maps right over here, it has a significant green space population. Now, most of the town is suburban, and we can see right over here on the rightmost map that there's a significant amount of green space protected as trails, conservation, and other elements of permanent protection. In fact, there's about 25% of the land designated, which is solely for recreation or conservation, with 80% of that land being then permanently protected. Now, Sturbridge as a town is a typical New England town. It has a town common, town hall, town church, all right in the center. And it was actually founded in around 1729. Settlers from the nearby settlement of New Medfield came over and settled the town. It gained the name Sturbridge in 1738. Now, moving forward a little bit, we can see that early Sturbridge was mostly powered by the water bodies nearby, powering sawmills, grist mills, and pearl and potash works. So we can already see there was some timber harvesting in early Sturbridge. Moving forward a little bit, we can see Sturbridge actually had an agricultural presence. This image, oops, right there, this image right down there is the Sturbridge Fair. It was an annual agricultural expedition that the Sturbridge town hosted every year, and I think it's a really good example of the agricultural prowess of the town. Going forward a little bit further, we can see as the town industrialized, they used the same water power in order to use industrial factories for augers, bits, and other things like that. Now, Sturbridge today has a population of around 9,597 people. Now, looking at this population graph, we can see that there's been a clear upwards trend, indicative of a typical New England town. Now, like all other towns in Massachusetts, Sturbridge has a tree warden. Tree warden Tony Crane, he was immensely helpful in this project. He works directly with the Department of Public Works in my town, not only the crews, but also the director himself. Now we can see in the private sector, he also works with the utility, specifically National Grid, and also another local tree company, Northern Tree. And as we move over here, we can see that for my tree inventory, I decided to do 2 sites at the recommendation of my tree warden. Site number 1 is called North Cemetery, and it was located on 44 Maple Street. Site number 2 is Public House Cemetery, and it was located on 293 Main Street. Now, the total amount of trees collected were 102, and some of the data I collected was species, diameter of breast height, condition, latitude, longitude, and then zoning designation. And if we look a little bit here, this is a species key. I can always, let's put it back in presentation mode so you can see it a little bit better. Looking at some of the results, we can see that on these graphs, the very, very first thing we notice is an absolutely large number of sugar maples. This large blue section, my apologies, let's just put that right back in there. This large blue section right in there is all sugar maples. I was very surprised by that. And I'll get into more detail on those graphs in just a second. First thing I want to draw attention to is this graph right here in the bottom right corner. Now, this graph right here is the tree inventory condition occurrences. These are how many goods, fairs, poors, and dead trees were in the inventory. Now, already we can see that they're doing pretty well. 71 of the trees out of 102 were rated good. In fact, that's not too uncommon. Now, while the urban environment has soil compaction, alkalinity, and lack of nutrients, the cemetery sites were not exposed to the same stressors. In fact, they often had quite wide open spacing. They had good amount of lights, and they had enough room to grow. So overall, we can see a lot more of a healthy population of trees. However, not all is well. Jumping over here in the top right to our key findings, we can see site number 1 has a large percentage of sugar maples. In fact, 70% of site number 1 was sugar maples. Now, while this may present potential value in terms of wood residue or lumber, the fact that this site is a graveyard does not exactly meet that. I did not recommend that option, and I don't think it'd be prudent for the tree warden to pursue that in any endeavor. Now, the second thing we can see is that the overall tree population is aging. So if we look down here, oops, my apologies. If we look down here at the very bottom of the graphs, right over here to the left, we can see the diameter of breast height stratified into different classes. Now, my inventory is right here in the blue bars, and the ideal, as per our lectures, is in the red. And what we can see immediately is that these two are polar opposites of each other. My inventory had a very large percentage of over-mature and very mature trees, right in here, while having a very small percentage of saplings and younger trees. However, it's recommended to have a larger number of younger saplings and a smaller number of very mature trees. So overall, while larger trees do provide more ecological benefits, this could present a problem as the trees begin to age, as they begin to die back, and as there is a large amount of dead trees for the tree warden to remove. Moving on to key finding number 3, we can see that there are 22 trees in the inventory that have a diameter at breast height greater than 32 inches. Now, the reason that's significant is because under the local laws that I investigated, we can clearly see that one of the eligibility factors for a state heritage tree is size, specifically diameter at breast height greater than 32 inches. So, in fact, we had 22 of those trees. Not all of them were in good condition, but it was very fascinating to see such large size. Now, going down to this graph right over here in the top right, these 4 graphs, we can see that this blue section is all sugar maples. We can see some eastern white pine. We can see some white oak and some eastern hemlock. Now, I wouldn't recommend for eastern white pine or eastern hemlock to be pursued as a heritage tree solely for the purpose of those species are actually on the prohibited species list for Sturbridge, and it is because, quote, of their growth characteristics. So moving down, we can see a little bit about some of the recommendations that we see. So based off my inventory, my first priority was addressing the aging population of both sites. Now, like I said before, one of my worries for this inventory was that this large percentage, right, of these over-mature and very mature trees would present difficulty to the local tree warden and their crews in removing them, similar to how Dutch elm disease produced large quantities of dead elms that could overwhelm the local capacity to remove them. Similarly, Site 1, also with its large percentage of sugar maples, is notably has a lack of diversity. Now, this could present a risk from disease and pests, notably emerald ash borer. The first recommendations that I made were to remove the 10 poor trees that were listed in the inventory to be able to utilize those spots as vacant tree spots. Now, along with that, I also recommended planting more saplings. In addition, because this site does not have the same constrictions as other urban soils, there are more species that can be planted. In fact, climax species, such as sugar maple, eastern hemlock, or American beech, have much better chances of survival. In fact, those species were all seen on the site already and were thriving. This gives us significantly more options because not only are these species climax species, they're also very shade tolerant, which means we can put them in areas where other trees may not actually thrive. Now, moving down here, we can see that because of the nature of the sites, we can see there is no concern for soil compaction or disturbance. Considering that the sites are cemeteries, I was concerned that the digging of graves, severing tree roots would be a problem. However, it seems that most of the graves were dug before the trees were planted after, and subsequent health was a-okay. Now we can see some of these mature sugar maples right over here. In fact, this one, the top image, it's a little bit difficult to see, but that mature sugar maple, its roots are actually lifting up one of the stones lining a plot in the cemetery. I thought that was absolutely fantastic. And then right down here, we have one of the trees that I did a tree risk assessment for. This mature sugar maple was located right next to a utility line, and there is significant dead wood in the central trunk. There was actually saprophytic fungi at the base of the trunk. Exciting for me because I love mushrooms, but not in this case. So that tree did have some problems that likely stemmed from improper utility pruning, leaving large wounds in the trunk and allowing disease and then fungi to infest the trees. Now, that pruning was done by National Grid, and in fact, National Grid has established in their maintenance division a hazardous tree division as of 2020. So hopefully that will help prune these trees in a more effective manner. Now, overall, before I finish up, I'd like to point out the inventory species composition once again, highlighting once again that we have far too many sugar maples. Actually, I take that back, just a lot of sugar maples. And we can see a very large diversity of species in the other sections. Now, it is very likely that these sites were not specifically planted. At least site number 1 was planted, and site number 2, Public House Cemetery, was likely simply trees that were left over and that grew there through natural processes that were not planted. Now, in site 1, the sheer abundance of sugar maples makes the prospect that it was natural fairly unlikely. In addition, there were saplings that were planted that still had the nursery tags on them. So clearly, there is an effort to plant there as well. And with that, I will address my works cited. I used plenty of local documents to help put this all together. It was extremely fun. I did enjoy it. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Tony Crane, my local tree warden. And of course, I would also like to thank all my professors here, the wonderful lectures. It's been very nice. Thank you.